My sister-in-law held my hand while I pushed her baby into the world. 12 hours later, she was on the phone with a lawyer discussing how to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could keep the child I'd just given birth to. The worst part? My own husband was in on it from the beginning. 3 years ago, I thought I had everything figured out. My name is Sarah, and at 26, I was living what felt like a charmed life. My husband Jake and I had been married for 4 years, and while we weren't ready for children yet, we were deeply in love and building our future together. Jake worked as a software engineer, and I was finishing my master's degree in early childhood education. We had this beautiful little house with a garden where I spent hours nurturing tomatoes and sunflowers. I guess I've always had a caretaker's heart. Jake's older sister, Claire, had been trying to conceive for 7 years. 7 long, heartbreaking years of fertility treatments, miscarriages, and disappointment. I watched her spirit slowly crumble with each failed attempt. The woman who had once been vibrant and full of laughter became hollow-eyed and desperate. Her marriage to David was strained to the breaking point. I remember the exact moment the idea came to me. We were at Claire's birthday dinner, and she was staring at a toddler at the next table with such longing that it physically hurt to witness. Without thinking, I reached across the table and took her hand. "What if I carried a baby for you?" I said softly. The table went silent. Jake's parents looked shocked. David's fork clattered to his plate. But Claire's eyes filled with tears, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in months. "Sarah," she whispered, "you would do that?" In that moment, seeing hope return to her face, I knew I would. I would give her the one thing she wanted most in the world. I would help her become a mother. The process took 6 months of legal paperwork, medical evaluations, and counseling sessions. Everyone, the doctors, the lawyers, the counselors, repeatedly asked if I was sure. Of course I was sure. This was my family. Claire wasn't just Jake's sister. She had become like a sister to me. She had been there when I lost my own mother to cancer 2 years earlier, holding me while I sobbed, helping me sort through Mom's belongings, never leaving my side during the hardest period of my life. I can't think of anything more beautiful than giving life to create a family, I told the counselor during our final session. Claire and David are going to be amazing parents. I'm just the vessel to help them get there. The in vitro fertilization process was successful on the first try. When I called Claire to tell her the pregnancy test was positive, she sobbed so hard she couldn't speak. Jake held me while I cried happy tears, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what we were creating together. Those first few months were magical. Claire came with me to every appointment, holding my hand during ultrasounds, her face glowing with wonder as we watched the baby develop. She bought prenatal vitamins and made sure I was eating properly. She painted a nursery and read every parenting book she could find. David started smiling again for the first time in years. Jake was incredibly supportive, rubbing my feet when they swelled, bringing me ice cream at midnight, and telling me how proud he was of my selflessness. His parents called me their angel daughter-in-law. I felt surrounded by love and purpose. But looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way Claire's eyes would narrow when strangers congratulated me on my pregnancy. How she would correct people who called it my baby by saying, "Actually, Sarah is carrying my child." The increasing frequency of her visits, how she started showing up unannounced to check on the baby. I thought it was natural anxiety. I thought she was just being protective because she'd wanted this for so long. I had no idea I was walking into a carefully constructed trap. The shift started around month 6. Claire began making comments about my emotional instability during pregnancy. Little remarks like, "Sarah's been so moody lately, haven't you noticed?" Or, "Pregnancy hormones are really affecting her judgment." At first, I laughed it off. Of course I was emotional. I was growing a human being. But then Jake started agreeing with her. "You have been pretty scattered lately, babe," he'd say when I forgot where I put my keys or mixed up appointment times. Maybe you should take it easy. Let Claire handle more of the baby planning. I started second-guessing myself. Was I being too emotional? Was I making poor decisions? When I mentioned to Claire that I was thinking about taking a semester off after the birth to help with the transition, she exchanged a look with Jake that I couldn't interpret. "That's not necessary," she said quickly. "We'll handle everything. You should focus on getting back to normal as soon as possible." Normal. As if carrying their child was abnormal. As if my natural desire to be involved in the early days was somehow wrong. The 7th month brought more concerning changes. Claire started accompanying me to appointments alone, claiming Jake was too busy with work. She would ask the doctor detailed questions about my mental state, mentioning my increased anxiety and irrational behavior. When I protested that I felt fine, she would smile sadly and say, "That's exactly what I'm worried about. You don't seem to recognize how much you've changed." I began to notice things were going missing from my house. Small things at first, a notebook where I'd been writing thoughts about the pregnancy, a journal I'd kept during my mother's illness. When I asked Jake about them, he claimed he hadn't seen them. Claire suggested I was becoming paranoid and maybe I should talk to someone. The gaslighting was so subtle, so perfectly orchestrated that I started to believe them. Maybe I was losing my grip on reality. Maybe pregnancy had affected me more than I realized. The doubt crept in like poison, making me question every emotion, every instinct, every memory. By month 8, I was a shadow of myself. I walked on eggshells, constantly worried that I was behaving strangely or saying the wrong thing. Claire had convinced me to let her handle all the birth arrangements, claiming I was too overwhelmed to make good decisions. She hired a doula, chose the hospital, and even selected the pediatrician, all without my input. "I just want what's best for the baby," she said when I questioned her choices. "You know how important this is to me." And because I loved her, because I wanted her to be happy, I stepped back. I let her take control of the birth of the child I was carrying. I ignored the voice in my head that screamed something was wrong. The birth itself was traumatic in ways I never expected. Claire insisted on being in the delivery room along with Jake and David. But instead of supporting me, she seemed to be documenting me, taking photos when I was at my most vulnerable, recording my pain responses on her phone. When I asked her to stop, she said she wanted to capture every moment of her child's birth. During the 36 hours of labor, I overheard fragments of whispered conversations between Claire and Jake. Words like unstable, attachment issues, and legal options floated through my consciousness. I was too exhausted, too focused on the overwhelming task of bringing life into the world to process what they meant. When Emma was finally born, 8 pounds, 6 ounces of perfect, screaming life, the first thing I felt was overwhelming love. Not the detached affection I'd expected to feel for Claire's baby, but the fierce, protective love of a mother. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a baby I was carrying. This was my daughter. I reached for her instinctively, but Claire was already there, taking Emma from the doctor's hands. "My baby," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "My perfect baby." Something fundamental shifted in that moment. The fog of manipulation lifted just enough for me to see clearly. I had just given birth to my own child, and they were taking her away. "I want to hold her," I said, my voice hoarse from hours of pushing. "Your daughter?" Claire's voice was sharp. "Sarah, honey, you're confused. This is my daughter. You're the surrogate, remember?" But I remembered everything now. The contract, yes, but also the law. I had 72 hours to change my mind. 72 hours to decide if I could really give away the child I'd just brought into the world. Claire must have seen the realization in my eyes because she immediately shifted into damage control mode. She said, "You're having a completely normal reaction. It's called postpartum psychosis. The hormones are making you think irrational things." Jake took my hand, his grip uncomfortably tight. "Babe, you need to trust us. You're not thinking clearly right now."
But I was thinking more clearly than I had in months. And what I saw terrified me.
The first 48 hours after Emma's birth were a blur of conflicting emotions and mounting dread. I was moved to a private room, arranged by Claire, who said she wanted me to have the best possible recovery. But I noticed the door was always closed, and there was always someone with me. Claire, Jake, David, or Jake's parents. Never alone. Never with Emma. "Where is she?" I asked repeatedly. "She's in the nursery, getting the best care," Claire would say. "You need to focus on healing." But when I asked the nurses about seeing the baby, they looked confused. "Which baby?" one finally asked. "The one that was transferred to the private nursery upstairs?" Transferred. Without my knowledge or consent. I started paying closer attention to the conversations happening around me. Claire and Jake spoke in hushed tones by the window, their words careful but their body language tense. David paced the hallway, constantly on his phone. Jake's parents kept shooting me worried glances, as if they were afraid I might do something unpredictable. On the second day, a social worker came to visit. She was young, probably newer to the job, and seemed genuinely concerned about my well-being. But her questions were leading, clearly based on information someone had already given her. "I understand you've been experiencing some emotional difficulties during the pregnancy," she said, consulting her notes. "Your family is concerned about your mental state." "My family?" I struggled to sit up straighter. "What exactly did they tell you?" She hesitated. "There have been reports of erratic behavior, mood swings, and concerning attachment to the baby you're carrying as a surrogate. Your husband and sister-in-law are worried about your ability to cope with the separation." Reports. Plural. They had been documenting my behavior, building a case against me. Every emotional moment, every perfectly normal response to pregnancy had been twisted into evidence of instability. "I want to see my daughter," I said firmly. The social worker's expression softened with what looked like pity. "Mrs. Matthews, I think there might be some confusion about your role here. You're the surrogate mother, not the legal parent. The baby belongs to your sister-in-law and her husband." Belongs. As if Emma was property to be owned rather than a human being with rights of her own. That night, after everyone had gone home, I made my first move. I called my own lawyer. Not the one who had handled the surrogacy contract, but a family law attorney my mother had used during her divorce years earlier. Patricia Wong was sharp, experienced, and most importantly, she had no prior relationship with Jake or Claire. "I need to understand my rights," I told her in a whispered phone call from the hospital bathroom. "I gave birth 2 days ago, and I think I'm being manipulated into giving up my parental rights." Patricia's voice was grave. "Sarah, in most states, you have a window of time to revoke consent for adoption, even in surrogacy cases. But you need to act quickly, and you need to document everything. Do you have any evidence of coercion or manipulation?" Evidence. I thought about the missing journal entries, the recorded conversations I'd overheard, the way Claire had been photographing my most vulnerable moments. "Yes, I think so, but I need to get out of here first." "Do not sign anything," Patricia warned, "and whatever you do, don't let them convince you to undergo any psychological evaluations until we can meet." Too late. The next morning, Claire arrived with a clipboard full of forms and a gentle smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The hospital wants to do a quick mental health screening before you're discharged," she explained. "Just routine for surrogates. Jake's already signed the consent forms as your husband." I stared at the papers, my mind racing. "I don't want to do that right now." Claire's mask slipped for just a moment. "Sarah, you're being unreasonable. Everyone is just trying to help you." "Help me what? Give up my daughter?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. Claire's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "She is not your daughter," she hissed. "She's mine. We have a contract. You agreed to carry my baby, and now you're trying to steal her from me." The irony was breathtaking. She was accusing me of theft while actively conspiring to take my child. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd be capable of doing. I lied to everyone I loved. I told Claire and Jake that I was feeling much better, that I understood my confusion had been hormone-related, and that I was ready to honor our agreement. I signed the discharge papers and smiled when they told me Emma would be going home with Claire and David. But I didn't go home. I went to Patricia's office. "I need you to understand something," I said, placing the surrogacy contract on her desk. "According to this document, what are my rights as the birth mother?" Patricia read through the contract carefully, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Sarah, this contract is unusual? There are clauses in here that seem designed to limit your rights beyond what's typical in surrogacy agreements. Look at this section about mental health evaluations. It gives your sister-in-law power to make medical decisions for you if you're deemed mentally compromised." My blood ran cold. Can she do that? Not legally, no. But if she can convince a court that you're mentally unstable, she could potentially use it to challenge any attempt you make to revoke consent. Patricia looked up from the papers. "Sarah, you need to tell me everything that's happened over the past few months. Every conversation, every incident, every time you felt like you were being manipulated or gaslit." So I told her everything. The gradual erosion of my confidence, the missing personal items, the way Claire had been documenting my every emotional response, the whispered conversations about my mental state. As I spoke, I watched Patricia's expression grow darker. "This is a systematic campaign to undermine your credibility," she said finally. "The question is, why? If this was always intended to be a straightforward surrogacy arrangement, why go to such lengths to make you appear unstable?" The answer hit me like a physical blow, because they never intended to let me change my mind. They knew I might have second thoughts, so they built a case to discredit me before I even gave birth. Patricia nodded grimly. "That's what it looks like. The question now is, what do you want to do about it?"
I thought about Emma, probably sleeping peacefully in Claire's arms, unaware that her entire future hung in the balance. I thought about the life I'd imagined for myself, the simple happiness I'd had before agreeing to this arrangement. I thought about my mother, who had taught me to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult. "I want my daughter back," I said, "and I want to expose what they did to me." But first, I needed proof. Patricia explained that my word against theirs wouldn't be enough, especially given the campaign they'd waged against my mental stability. I needed concrete evidence of the conspiracy. "You need to go back," she said. "Pretend to cooperate while you gather evidence. I know it's dangerous, and I know it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done, but it's the only way." So I went home. I walked into the house I shared with Jake and pretended that nothing had changed. I smiled when he hugged me and told me how proud he was of my strength in honoring our agreement. I nodded when he said Claire was doing wonderfully with Emma and that visiting too often might confuse the baby. But late at night, when Jake was asleep, I began my investigation. I started with Jake's computer. Years of marriage had taught me his passwords, and I found a folder labeled Surrogacy Documentation that made my blood run cold. Inside were dozens of files, photos of me during vulnerable moments, audio recordings of conversations I didn't remember consenting to, and, most damning of all, a detailed log of my behavior that painted me as increasingly unstable. The entries were written in Claire's handwriting, but saved on Jake's computer. March 15, Sarah became irrationally upset when I suggested we paint the nursery yellow instead of pink. She accused me of trying to control everything and stormed out. Jake had to calm her down. April 2, Sarah forgot our doctor's appointment and became defensive when I reminded her. She seems to be having memory issues. April 20, Sarah mentioned feeling like the baby was hers during ultrasound, concerning attachment developing. Each entry was a masterpiece of manipulation, taking normal pregnancy experiences and twisting them into evidence of mental instability. But more than that, they were lies.
I remembered these incidents differently, and I was certain that my memory was more accurate than their documentation. I photographed every file, every entry, every piece of evidence I could find. Then I moved on to Jake's phone, searching through his text messages and call logs. What I found there broke my heart all over again. A text thread between Jake and Claire dated 3 weeks before Emma's birth.
She's getting suspicious. Asked me why I was taking so many photos during appointments.
Just stick to the plan. The lawyer says we have enough documentation to prove she's unstable if she tries to fight us.
What if she doesn't sign the final papers?
Then we go to court. Dr. Harrison will testify about her emotional state, and we have months of evidence. No judge will give custody to someone who's clearly having a breakdown.
I feel bad about this sometimes. She's been so good to us.
We're doing what's best for the baby. Sarah isn't ready to be a mother, and you are. Emma deserves parents who can provide stability.
I had to leave the room to vomit. My own husband, the man who had promised to love and cherish me, was actively plotting to steal my child and destroy my reputation. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated that I could barely comprehend it. But I kept digging. I found emails between Claire and a private investigator commissioning background checks on me that focused on my family's history of mental illness. I found correspondence with Dr. Harrison, the obstetrician Claire had chosen, discussing my concerning behavior patterns and the need for careful monitoring of the patient's psychological state. Most sickening of all, I found a group text between Jake, Claire, David, and Jake's parents discussing the Sarah situation and how to manage her expectations during the birth process. They had all been in on it. Every person I had trusted, every family member who had told me how wonderful I was for helping Claire had been part of the conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed more. I needed to catch them in the act, to record them admitting to their manipulation. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to pretend to have a breakdown.
The plan was simple in theory. I would fake a psychological crisis, let them think their gaslighting had worked, and record them discussing their conspiracy while they thought I was too unstable to be a credible witness. Patricia had connected me with a private investigator who could provide recording equipment and help me document everything legally. But what I didn't anticipate was how playing the role of an unstable person would affect my actual mental state. The line between performance and reality began to blur in ways that terrified me. I started small. I would forget conversations, leaving Claire to correct my memory with her version of events. I would get emotional at random moments, then apologize for being so hormonal. I would make mistakes, leaving the stove on, forgetting appointments, losing track of my keys, and let Jake and Claire exchange those knowing looks about my declining mental state. "I'm worried about you," Claire would say, her voice dripping with false concern. "You haven't been yourself since the birth." "I know," I would respond, playing my part. "I feel like I'm losing my mind." The words were supposed to be an act, but saying them out loud made them feel real. I began to question my own perceptions just as I had during the pregnancy. Was I really acting, or was I genuinely losing my grip on reality? The recording equipment became my lifeline. Every conversation, every interaction, every moment of manipulation was captured on the tiny device Patricia had given me. During the day, I would play the broken woman they expected to see. At night, I would listen to the recordings and remind myself of the truth. But the truth was becoming harder to hold on to. The isolation was crushing. I couldn't tell anyone what I was really doing, couldn't reach out for support, couldn't even see Emma without arousing suspicion. I was living in a house with a man who was actively trying to destroy me, surrounded by people who had betrayed me, playing a role that was slowly consuming my actual identity. 3 weeks into my performance, I got the breakthrough I needed. Claire and Jake were in the kitchen, discussing my deteriorating condition while they thought I was napping upstairs. I crept to the top of the stairs with my recording device, my heart pounding as I listened to them plan my destruction. "She's getting worse," Claire said, her voice filled with satisfaction rather than concern. "Yesterday, she asked me if she could see Emma, and when I said no, she just started crying. She didn't even argue." "Good," Jake replied. "The lawyer says we need consistent documentation of her instability. A few more weeks of this, and we'll have enough evidence to permanently terminate her parental rights." "What if she snaps out of it? What if she realizes what we're doing?" Jake's laugh was cold. "Sarah's not smart enough to figure this out. She's exactly as naive as she's always been. Besides, look at her family history. Her mother had depression. Her grandmother was institutionalized. We're not making her crazy. We're just helping her natural tendencies along." The casual cruelty in his voice made me dizzy. This was the man who had held me while I cried about my mother's death, who had promised to love me in sickness and in health, who had made me believe I was safe and cherished. He was discussing my destruction as if it were a minor inconvenience. But Claire's next words were even worse. "I almost feel sorry for her. She really thought she was doing something beautiful by carrying Emma for us." "Don't," Jake warned. "The moment we start feeling guilty is the moment we make mistakes. Sarah chose to be a surrogate. She signed the contract. We're just making sure she honors it." "But we're destroying her life." "We're saving Emma's life," Jake corrected. "Do you want our daughter raised by someone who's mentally unstable? Someone who can't even remember to turn off the stove or show up to appointments? Sarah's breakdown proves we made the right choice." "Our daughter," he had said. "Our daughter, not your daughter." The conspiracy went deeper than I had imagined. This wasn't just about Claire's desperate desire for a child. This was about Jake and Claire taking Emma together, cutting me out of my own family entirely. I made it back to the bedroom before I started shaking. The recording device felt heavy in my hands, weighted with the evidence of their betrayal. I had what I needed for court, but the cost was higher than I had anticipated. I was losing myself. The constant performance, the isolation, the betrayal, it was all becoming too much. I would catch myself genuinely forgetting things, actually feeling confused about events that had happened just hours before. The line between acting unstable and being unstable was disappearing. That night, I called Patricia from the bathroom with the water running to mask my voice. "I have the evidence," I whispered, "but I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." "Sarah, you sound different. Are you okay?" Was I okay? I wasn't sure anymore. "I think playing crazy is making me actually crazy." "That's called learned helplessness," Patricia said gently. "It's a common response to gaslighting. Your mind is protecting itself by adapting to the reality they have created. But Sarah, you need to remember you're not actually unstable. You're responding normally to an abnormal situation." Her words helped, but only temporarily. The next morning, I woke up to find Jake packing a suitcase. "Where are you going?" I asked, though I already knew. "He's moving in with Claire and David to help raise my daughter, leaving me alone in our house to complete my psychological breakdown in isolation." The abandonment was so complete, so calculated that I almost admired its efficiency. After he left, I sat in our empty bedroom and stared at the recording device. I had enough evidence to prove their conspiracy, but what would it cost me? Even if I won Emma back, I would still be the woman who had been so thoroughly manipulated that she had questioned her own sanity. I would still be the person who had been betrayed by everyone she loved. The woman who had agreed to be a surrogate out of love and generosity was gone. In her place was someone harder, more suspicious, more alone. I had lost my husband, my sister-in-law, my in-laws, and my sense of self. Even if I got Emma back, I would never be the same person who had carried her. But as I sat there in the silence of my empty house, I realized something important. I was still Emma's mother. Despite everything they had done to me,
Despite all the ways they had tried to break me, that fundamental truth remained unchanged. I had carried her for 9 months, brought her into the world, and loved her from the moment she was conceived. They could take my husband, my family, my peace of mind, and my trust in others, but they couldn't take my love for my daughter, and that love was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The showdown came sooner than I expected. 2 days after Jake moved out, I received a call from Dr. Harrison's office asking me to come in for a routine postpartum checkup. But when I arrived, I found Claire and Jake waiting in the room with the doctor, their faces grave with manufactured concern. "Sarah," Dr. Harrison said gently, "your family has expressed some concerns about your mental state. I'd like to discuss the possibility of a brief inpatient stay to help you through this difficult transition." Inpatient stay. They were trying to have me committed. It was the final step in their plan. Once I was institutionalized, they could claim I was too mentally ill to care for Emma, and the courts would likely agree. But I was ready for this. I had spent the last 3 weeks gathering evidence, and more importantly, I had spent the last 3 weeks learning to trust my own perceptions again. I was not the broken woman they believed me to be. "I appreciate your concern," I said calmly, "but I'm feeling much better. In fact, I'd like to discuss something important with Claire and Jake." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the examining table. "I've been recording our conversations for the past 3 weeks. Would you like to hear what you really sound like when you think I'm too unstable to be a credible witness?" The blood drained from Claire's face. Jake took a step backward as if I had struck him. "Sarah," Claire said, her voice shaking, "your family has expressed some concerns about your mental state." I pressed play on the recording from 3 days earlier. Jake's voice filled the room, cold and calculating as he discussed terminating my parental rights. Claire's voice followed, expressing mock sympathy for the woman she was actively destroying. Dr. Harrison's expression changed from concern to horror as he listened. "I think I need to step out of the room," he said quietly, clearly realizing he had been manipulated into participating in their scheme. After he left, the three of us sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Claire broke. "You don't understand," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I've wanted a baby for so long. 7 years, Sarah. 7 years of hoping and praying and failing. When you offered to carry her for me, it was like a miracle. But then I started thinking, what if you changed your mind? What if you decided to keep her? So you decided to destroy me instead?" "I decided to protect my daughter," Claire's voice cracked. "I've been preparing for this baby for 7 years. I've read every parenting book, bought every piece of equipment, planned every detail of her life. You carried her for 9 months, but I've been loving her for years." The pain in her voice was real, but it didn't excuse what she had done. "So you turned my husband against me? Made me question my own sanity? Documented my every emotion to use against me in court?" Jake spoke for the first time since the recording ended. "We were protecting Emma. You were getting too attached, Sarah. We could see it happening, and we knew you'd try to take her away from Claire." "She's my daughter, Jake. I gave birth to her. Of course I'm attached." "No," Claire said firmly. "She's my daughter. You were just a vessel. You were supposed to carry her and give her to me, not fall in love with her." The word vessel hit me like a physical blow. After everything I had given them, after carrying their child and nearly destroying myself in the process, I was nothing more than a vessel to them. Not a person with feelings and rights and agency, but a tool to be used and discarded. "I want to see my daughter," I said quietly. "That's not possible," Claire replied. "She's bonding with me. It would confuse her to—" "I want to see my daughter," I said again, my voice stronger this time. "And I want you to explain to me why you thought it was acceptable to gaslight me into believing I was mentally ill." Claire's composure finally cracked completely. Because I was desperate, she screamed. Do you know what it's like to want something so badly that you can't breathe? To watch everyone around you get pregnant accidentally while you spend thousands of dollars and years of your life trying to create just one viable embryo? Her pain was raw and real, but it didn't excuse her actions. So you decided to take my pain instead? You weren't supposed to feel pain. You were supposed to be happy for me. You were supposed to understand that this was always the plan. Claire was sobbing now, her carefully constructed facade completely gone. But you started acting like Emma was yours, like you had some right to her just because you carried her. I do have a right to her. I'm her mother. No, you're not, Claire said brokenly. I'm her mother. I've been her mother since the moment she was conceived. I've been planning her life, buying her clothes, preparing her nursery. You just grew her for me. The dehumanization was complete. In Claire's mind, I had never been anything more than an incubator, a biological function rather than a person with feelings and rights. The love I had shown her over the years, the sacrifice I had made carrying her child, the family bond I had believed we shared, none of it had been real to her. Jake stepped forward, his face pale. Sarah, we never meant for it to go this far. We just wanted to make sure Emma would be safe with parents who could take care of her. Safe from what? From the woman who carried her for 9 months and loves her more than life itself? From someone who's mentally unstable. From someone who can't handle the responsibilities of motherhood. I stared at him, this man that I had once loved completely, and realized that I was looking at a stranger. The Jake I had married would never have participated in such a cruel conspiracy. Either he had changed, or I had never really known him at all. The only thing that made me unstable was your manipulation. Every doubt, every moment of confusion, every time I questioned my own memory, that was you. You created the mental illness you claimed to be protecting Emma from. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of destroyed relationships and shattered trust. Finally, Claire spoke, her voice barely higher than a whisper. What do you want from us? I want my daughter back, and I want you to face the consequences of what you've done.
The legal battle that followed was swift but brutal. Patricia had prepared well, and the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the documented lies, the systematic campaign of psychological manipulation. It all painted a clear picture of conspiracy and fraud. Dr. Harrison, horrified by his unwitting participation in their scheme, provided testimony about how Claire had misrepresented my mental state. The private investigator they had hired reluctantly admitted that his background check had found no evidence of mental instability in my family history. That had been a lie Claire told to justify their actions. But the most damaging evidence came from their own documentation. The detailed logs of my behavior, the recorded conversations, the photos taken without my consent, all of it backfired spectacularly. Instead of proving my instability, it proved their calculated cruelty. The judge was not sympathetic to their cause. What I see here, she said during the final hearing, is a systematic effort to psychologically manipulate a vulnerable new mother into believing she was mentally ill. This goes beyond mere surrogacy disputes. This is emotional abuse designed to facilitate the theft of a child. Jake and Claire were ordered to return Emma to me immediately. Claire was also ordered to undergo psychological evaluation herself, and both she and Jake faced potential criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. The surrogacy contract was declared invalid due to the coercive circumstances under which it was maintained. But winning the legal battle didn't feel like victory. The day I brought Emma home, I sat in her nursery, the one I had hastily assembled in the bedroom that used to be my office, and realized how much I had lost in the process of getting her back. My marriage was over. Jake moved out permanently, and the divorce proceedings were ugly and public. He tried to claim that I had manipulated him, that Claire had been the mastermind and he had been an unwitting participant. But the recordings proved otherwise.
They showed a man who had actively participated in psychologically torturing his wife for months. My relationship with Jake's family was destroyed beyond repair. His parents, who had been like family to me for years, sided with Claire and Jake. They genuinely believed that I had stolen Emma from their daughter, that I had used my position as surrogate to manipulate the situation for my own gain. The fact that I had legal and moral right to my own child didn't matter to them. Most painfully, I had lost the version of myself that had existed before all this began. The woman who had trusted easily, who had believed in the goodness of family, who had been willing to sacrifice herself for others. She was gone. In her place was someone harder, more suspicious, more alone. I developed genuine anxiety and depression in the aftermath. The months of gaslighting had left their mark, and I found myself constantly second-guessing my own perceptions. I would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced that Emma was still with Claire, that the custody victory had been a dream. I started seeing a therapist, but it would take years to fully trust my own mind again. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to frame me as mentally unstable, they had actually made me mentally unstable. The trauma of their betrayal, the isolation, the constant questioning of my own reality, it had all taken a real psychological toll. I had become, in some ways, the person they had always claimed I was. But I had Emma. Every morning when I woke up to her cries, every evening when I fed her and rocked her to sleep, I was reminded of why the fight had been worth it. She was mine, not because of any contract or legal document, but because I had carried her, birthed her, and loved her from the moment she existed. 6 months after the custody case ended, I received an unexpected visitor. Claire stood on my doorstep, looking haggard and broken, clutching a small gift bag. "She brought something for Emma," she said quietly. "Some clothes I bought for her. I know I have no right to see her, but I wanted to give these to her." I stood in the doorway, Emma sleeping in my arms, and looked at the woman who had once been like a sister to me. She had lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes. The divorce from David had been finalized the month before. Their marriage hadn't survived the scandal and legal proceedings. "Why?" I asked. "Why did you do this to me?" Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was dying inside. Every day for 7 years, I felt like I was dying a little more. And when you offered to carry Emma for me, it was like being thrown a lifeline. But then I started thinking about all the things that could go wrong, all the ways I could lose her, and I couldn't handle the uncertainty. So you decided to destroy me instead of dealing with your own fear." I told myself I was protecting Emma. I told myself you weren't ready to be a mother, that you were too young, too naive, too unstable. But the truth is, I was terrified that you would be a better mother than me, that you would love her more than I could. The admission hung between us like a confession. After everything that had happened, Claire was finally telling the truth. "I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah. I loved you. You were like the sister I never had. But I loved Emma more, and I let that love turn into something twisted and selfish." I looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully in my arms, unaware of the complicated history that had brought her into the world. She's not a prize to be won, Claire. She's a person. She deserves to be loved without all this manipulation and cruelty. I know that now. I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did. The therapist says I have some kind of attachment disorder, that my desperation to have a child made me capable of things I never thought I could do. It was too little, too late. The damage was done, the trust was broken, and nothing could undo the months of psychological torture I had endured. But there was something in Claire's voice, a genuine remorse that hadn't been there during the custody battle. "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time I believed her. "I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't expect a relationship with Emma. I just wanted you to know that I realize now how wrong I was."
I stood there for a long moment, holding my daughter and looking at the woman who had once been family. The old Sarah would have invited her in, would have tried to rebuild the relationship, would have believed that love could overcome any betrayal. But the new Sarah, the one forged in the fire of manipulation and gaslighting, was more cautious. I appreciate the apology, I said finally, but I can't have you in our lives. What you did to me, it changed me permanently. I may forgive you someday, but I'll never trust you again. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I hope Emma grows up knowing how much she was wanted by both of us. After she left, I sat in Emma's room and thought about the strange journey that had brought us here. I had set out to give the gift of motherhood to a woman I loved, and instead I had discovered the depths of human cruelty and the strength I never knew I possessed. The woman who had agreed to be a surrogate was gone, replaced by someone who understood that family isn't always about blood or marriage vows. It's about who shows up when things get difficult, who tells you the truth even when it's hard to hear, who protects you instead of exploiting your vulnerabilities. I had lost a husband, a sister-in-law, and a sense of innocence about human nature, but I had gained something more valuable, my daughter, and the knowledge that I was strong enough to fight for what mattered most. Emma stirred in my arms, her tiny fingers curling around mine. She would grow up knowing that her mother had fought for her, that love sometimes requires incredible courage, and that the family you choose is often stronger than the family you're born into. The story could have ended there, with the quiet satisfaction of justice served and a mother reunited with her child. But life, as I had learned, is rarely that simple. 3 years have passed since Emma came home with me. She's a bright, curious toddler now, with Jake's eyes and my stubborn streak. She calls me Mama and has no memory of the chaos that surrounded her birth. To her, I've always been her mother, and the complicated history of her origins is a story for another day. The legal consequences for Jake and Claire were significant, but not as severe as they could have been. Jake was charged with conspiracy and fraud, but he plea bargained down to a lesser charge and avoided jail time. He pays child support and has supervised visitation rights, though he rarely exercises them. Our interactions are cordial but cold. We are tied together by our daughter, but have nothing else left to say to each other. Claire faced more serious charges due to her role as the primary architect of the conspiracy. She spent 6 months in a minimum security facility and was ordered to complete extensive psychological counseling. She has not attempted to contact me since that day on my doorstep, though I hear through mutual acquaintances that she has moved to another state and is slowly rebuilding her life. The most unexpected consequence of the whole ordeal was the relationship I developed with David, Claire's ex-husband. He reached out to me about a year after the custody case ended, wanting to apologize for his role in the conspiracy. Unlike Jake and Claire, David's involvement had been more passive. He had gone along with their plan without fully understanding its scope or cruelty. "I thought I was supporting my wife through a difficult time," he told me during a coffee meeting that I had agreed to reluctantly. "I didn't realize how calculated it all was until I heard the recordings in court." David's remorse seemed genuine, and over time, we developed an unlikely friendship. He sends birthday cards to Emma and occasionally babysits when I need an evening out. It's strange how the wreckage of one relationship can sometimes create the foundation for another. I've been in therapy for 2 years now, working through the trauma of the betrayal and the lingering effects of the gaslighting. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, has helped me understand that what I experienced has a name: psychological abuse. The systematic undermining of my reality, the isolation, the manipulation, it's a recognized form of domestic violence, even when it doesn't involve physical harm. "Your response to the situation was completely normal," she assured me during one of our sessions. "You were being psychologically tortured by people you trusted. The fact that you questioned your own sanity doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." The hardest part of recovery has been learning to trust my own perceptions again. For months after the custody case, I would second-guess every decision, every emotion, every memory. I would ask friends to confirm conversations we'd had, worried that I was misremembering or misinterpreting things. The constant self-doubt was exhausting. But slowly, with therapy and the support of true friends,
I've begun to trust myself again. I've learned to recognize the difference between normal uncertainty and the artificial doubt that was implanted in my mind by Jake and Claire's manipulation. I've learned that questioning myself isn't always a sign of weakness. Sometimes it's a sign of wisdom. My relationship with Emma has been the most healing part of this journey. She is pure joy, uncomplicated love, and endless curiosity about the world. When I watch her play or listen to her babble, I'm reminded of why I fought so hard to keep her. She is my daughter not because of any legal document or biological connection, but because we chose each other. I've also found unexpected strength in sharing my story with other women who have experienced similar betrayals. Through online support groups and local meetups, I've connected with other mothers who have been gaslit, manipulated, or abused by family members. My story has become a cautionary tale about the dangers of blind trust, but also a beacon of hope for women who feel trapped in similar situations. "You saved yourself," one woman told me after I spoke at a survivors support group. "But more than that, you saved your daughter. You showed us all that it's possible to fight back and win." The victory, though, came at a cost that I'm still paying. I'm more suspicious now, more guarded, less willing to trust people. I've become someone who reads the fine print, who asks difficult questions, who doesn't take people at their word. Some days I mourn the loss of my former naive optimism. Other days, I'm grateful for the hard-won wisdom. Dating has been complicated. It's difficult to open your heart to someone new when you've been so thoroughly betrayed by someone you loved. I've had a few relationships over the past 3 years, but none have progressed to anything serious. The men I've dated have been understanding about my trust issues, but understanding and patience have limits. I feel like I'm competing with ghosts, one particularly honest man told me after we'd been dating for 6 months. "Every time I try to get close to you, you pull away. I understand why, but I can't build a relationship with someone who's still fighting a war from 3 years ago."
He wasn't wrong. I am still fighting that war, still dealing with the aftermath of the betrayal. Some days I wonder if I'll ever be able to love someone completely again, or if Jake and Claire stole that from me permanently, along with everything else. But then I look at Emma and I remember that love isn't just about romantic relationships. The love I feel for my daughter is fierce and complete and uncomplicated by doubt. It's the kind of love that I fought for, that I nearly lost myself to protect. It's the kind of love that makes everything else worthwhile. The financial cost of the legal battle was significant. Even though I won the custody case, the legal fees, the private investigator, the recording equipment, it all added up to thousands of dollars I didn't have. I had to sell the house Jake and I had shared, partly because I couldn't afford the mortgage alone, but mostly because I couldn't bear to live in the place where I had been so thoroughly deceived. Emma and I moved into a small apartment across town, closer to my work and farther from the memories. It's smaller than what she deserves, but it's ours. Every night when I tuck her into her bed and her tiny bedroom, I'm reminded that home isn't about the size of the space. It's about the safety and love within it. I've changed careers as well. My experience with the legal system, both as a victim and as someone who had to fight for justice, inspired me to go back to school for a law degree. I'm specializing in family law with a focus on surrogacy rights and psychological abuse cases. It's been challenging to balance law school with single motherhood, but it feels like the right path. I want to help other women who find themselves in situations like mine, I told my academic advisor when I was applying for the program. I want to make sure they have someone who understands what they're going through. The irony isn't lost on me that my greatest betrayal led to my greatest purpose. Jake and Claire's conspiracy didn't just steal months of my life, it redirected the entire trajectory of my future. I'm not sure if I'm grateful for that redirection, but I'm determined to make something meaningful from the wreckage. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had never discovered their plan. Would I have signed away my parental rights and spent the rest of my life wondering about the daughter I gave away?
Would I have had other children with Jake, never knowing that he was capable of such calculated cruelty? Would I have lived my entire life trusting people who saw me as nothing more than a tool to be used? The thought terrifies me more than anything else that happened. The idea that I could have lived my whole life in a lie, surrounded by people who didn't truly love me, is worse than the pain of discovering the truth. At least now I know who I really am, a woman who is strong enough to fight for what she believes in, even when the cost is everything she thought she wanted. Emma is starting to ask questions about her father, about why he doesn't live with us, about the other family members she sees in photos but doesn't know. I've been preparing for these conversations with Dr. Martinez, trying to figure out how to explain complicated adult betrayals to a child who deserves simple, honest answers. You tell her the truth, age-appropriate truth, but truth nonetheless. She deserves to know that her mother fought for her, that love sometimes requires difficult choices, and that family is about who shows up, not who shares your DNA. So, I've started telling Emma stories about the brave mother who loved her so much that she never gave up fighting for her. I tell her about the difficult time when some people tried to keep them apart, but love was stronger than their plans. I tell her about the helpers who appeared along the way, Patricia, Dr. Martinez, the friends who brought casseroles and babysat during court dates. "Were you scared, Mama?" Emma asked me the other night during our bedtime story. "Yes, baby, I was very scared, but I was more scared of losing you than I was of fighting for you." "And you won?" "We won, because we belong together." It's the truth, simplified for a 3-year-old mind, but no less accurate for its simplicity. We did win, though victory looks different than I expected. It's not the triumphant ending of a movie where the hero gets everything they wanted and lives happily ever after. It's messier than that, more complicated, more real. Victory is Emma's laugh when I push her on the swing at the park. Victory is the diploma I'll receive when I finish law school. Victory is the nights when I sleep peacefully, no longer waking up convinced that someone is trying to steal my daughter. Victory is the slowly rebuilding trust in my own perceptions, the gradually healing wounds in my psyche. Most of all, victory is the knowledge that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be, in a small apartment with a daughter who calls me mama, building a life that is entirely our own. It's not the life I planned 3 years ago, but it's the life I fought for, and that makes all the difference. Outro call to action. Looking directly at camera, Emma playing quietly in the background. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're questioning your own reality, if people you trust are making you doubt your own perceptions, if you feel like you're losing your mind, please know that you're not alone. Gaslighting is real, psychological abuse is real, and your feelings are valid. Trust your instincts, document everything, reach out for help, and remember that fighting for what you love is never easy, but it's always worth it. What's the most important thing you've had to fight for? Share your story in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear it. And if this video helped you feel less alone, please like and subscribe. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply let others know they're not the only ones who've been through something difficult. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of Emma's village, even from afar. And remember, you are stronger than you know, and you deserve to be loved by people who see you as more than just a means to an end.